All right, buckle up for this deep dive because this one is going to be pretty intense.
Yeah, definitely not for the faint of heart.
We're looking into a recent murder in South Korea,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not just about the crime itself.
Mm.
We're really going to try and get inside the killer's head.
Right. Try to understand the psychology behind it all.
Exactly. And all this is coming from a YouTube video on the true crime channel, Rotten Mango.
Oh, I've seen that channel. They do some really good work.
Yeah, they really dig deep into these cases.
It's a wild one for sure, and it really makes you think.
So the victim, we'll call her Hannah to protect her identity,
Okay.
was a young English tutor,
Mm.
using one of those apps to connect with students.
Yeah, those are pretty popular these days.
And that's how she met 23-year-old Tong Yu Jong.
The killer?
Yeah, but here's the crazy part.
What's that?
Yu Jong, disguised herself as a middle schooler.
What?
Get into Hannah's apartment.
Seriously?
I know, right?
That's some seriously creepy premeditation.
Chillin'.
Suggests a really calculated approach, which is especially unsettling when you consider how normal Yu Jong seemed to be.
Total double life.
Yeah, on the surface, she was just this quiet, withdrawn person, almost a ghost.
But underneath, there was this whole other side to her,
Yeah.
capable of some serious violence.
Yeah, and the crime itself, brutal doesn't even begin to describe it.
Rotten Mango really went into the details of the stabbing.
It's just awful. But what I find most disturbing is how intentional it all was.
Yeah.
Like, Yu Jong had researched exactly how to inflict maximum damage, targeting a specific area of the neck over and over again.
It wasn't just like a heat-of-the-moment thing.
No, not at all. This was planned and precise.
And after the murder, it's like she just went about her business.
Right, spent hours in Hannah's apartment.
Even changed into her clothes before calmly dismembering the body.
It makes you wonder about her state of mind, you know?
Like, was she having a psychotic break or something?
Maybe? Or was it something even darker, like psychopathy?
That's where the whole invisible part of her life gets really interesting.
Totally. I mean, she was described as a loner, barely talked to anyone.
Classmates even remember her sitting behind curtains all the time.
As if she was watching the world from a distance.
Super strange, especially for someone her age.
You know, teenagers are usually all about connecting with others, being part of a group.
Right.
So her isolation suggests a real disconnect, maybe even some early signs of psychological issues.
And it gets even weirder after high school.
Oh, how is
She
it?
spent 5 years pretending to study for an exam.
For 5 years?
Yeah, but she wasn't even qualified to take it.
Sounds like she was building this whole fake life to explain why she had no job or social life.
Exactly, like she was hiding in plain sight.
And then even after she was arrested, she kept up the lies.
Oh yeah, what was it she said?
She told the police the remains in her suitcase were her baby.
Oh wow, so manipulative.
Clearly a cunning mind, able to twist things even in the face of something so horrific.
And then there's the whole true crime obsession.
Oh yeah, that's a huge red flag.
Her phone records showed she was constantly watching documentaries about murder and stuff.
And psychiatrists think she was fixated on the killers themselves.
Really?
Trying to understand how they felt, what motivated them.
Like she was going beyond the typical true crime fan.
Right. This wasn't about justice or understanding criminal behavior. It was something much darker.
And then she drops that chilling line after her arrest.
I just wanted to experience murder.
Gives me shivers just thinking about it.
It really makes you wonder, was she just curious? Or was there something much deeper going on?
I mean, how do you even begin to make sense of that?
Yeah, it's a real head scratcher.
Like, what could possibly drive someone to do something so awful?
To try and understand, we need to dig a little deeper into Yu Jong's past.
Yeah, like, what was her childhood like?
Were there any early warning signs?
How did her being so isolated shape her view of the world?
So many questions.
Definitely a lot to unpack here.
For sure, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
It's just wild to think about,
What's that?
This young woman was practically invisible, living this super isolated life.
Right.
But at the same time, she's totally immersed in this world of true crime.
It's almost like those documentaries became her only connection to the outside world.
Yeah, but in a really messed up way.
Yeah, for sure.
And you got to wonder if that isolation, being so cut off from people,
Yeah.
if that allowed some really dark fantasies to take root.
Absolutely. I mean, when you're that disconnected from real human connection, it becomes easier to detach yourself from the consequences of your actions.
Even if it's just in your own mind.
Exactly. And this case is like a prime example of how dangerous that isolation can be.
Not just for the individual, but for society as a whole.
Right. When people feel alienated and disconnected, they can become more vulnerable to extreme ideologies and behaviors.
And Rotten Mango touched on this concept called hikikomori.
Oh, yeah, that's a Japanese term for people who basically withdraw completely from society.
They shut themselves in their homes,
Yeah.
sometimes for years.
It's a really extreme form of social isolation.
And while Yu Jong wasn't a full-blown hikikomori, she definitely had some similarities.
Right, the lack of interaction, pretending to study for all those years.
No friends, no contacts in her phone.
It all points to a really deep-seated social anxiety and an inability to connect with the world in a healthy way.
It's like she was trapped in her own little world.
A world that was increasingly shaped by her obsession with true crime.
And that combination, the isolation and the true crime, it's like a recipe for a disaster.
It could have created this perfect storm in her mind.
Do you think she started seeing those crimes as a way to escape her own reality?
It's possible, maybe in her mind, committing a shocking act was the only way to break free from her invisible existence, to finally be seen.
But if that was the motivation, why didn't she show any remorse afterward?
Yeah, that's a really puzzling aspect of the case.
The video mentioned how people in South Korea were outraged that she seemed totally fine in prison.
Yeah, eating and sleeping like nothing happened.
Like the weight of her crime didn't even faze her.
That lack of remorse is definitely a red flag. Could be a sign of psychopathy.
Psychopathy, that's a personality disorder, right?
Right. It's characterized by a lack of empathy and remorse.
They also tend to be manipulative and impulsive.
Yeah.
But it's weird because her psychopathy test scores were all over the place.
Yeah, that is strange.
First, she scored below the threshold, but then later her score jumped way up.
Well, psychopathy tests aren't perfect.
Makes sense.
It's possible she was able to hide her true nature at first. You know, she was good at deception.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Or maybe the trauma of the crime itself triggered a shift in her personality.
So it's hard to say for sure if she's a master manipulator?
Or if she's genuinely detached from what she did.
Yeah, like what's real and what's an act?
And that's what makes this case so unsettling. We might never truly know what was going on inside her head.
Rotten Mango even suggested she might be a pathological liar.
Oh, wow, meaning even her confession could be a lie.
Wait, so she might not have even wanted to experience murder.
It's a possibility. Pathological liars are known for creating elaborate stories.
Often to get attention or manipulate others.
So that line about wanting to experience murder could have just been another one of her fabrications.
Okay, now that is seriously disturbing.
It really throws a wrench in things.
Like, if we can't even trust her words, how can we ever hope to understand her actions?
It's a tough one. We might never have all the answers.
So I guess we have to look at the bigger picture.
Right, like what societal factors could have played a role.
And one of those factors has got to be the whole true crime phenomenon.
Absolutely. Millions of people watch true crime content without ever harming anyone.
Right.
But in Yu Jong's case, it seems like her interest crossed a line. It became an unhealthy obsession.
Yeah, it's like those documentaries fed her dark fantasies.
And then you've got the role of technology.
Oh yeah, the internet can be a double-edged sword.
It can connect us, but it can also create these echo chambers where people get lost in their own worlds.
And detached from reality.
Exactly. And I think this case really forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves.
About the dark side of human nature.
The potential dangers of social isolation and unchecked access to information.
This whole deep dive is giving me chills.
Yeah, that's a lot to take in.
It's a reminder that even in a hyper-connected world, loneliness and isolation can create a breeding ground for evil.
And sometimes there just aren't any easy answers.
Or clear explanations for these senseless acts of violence.
Unfortunately, that's the reality we live in sometimes.
And the story doesn't end there.
No, it doesn't.
This case had a huge impact on everyone involved.
Not just Hannah's family and friends.
But also people like the taxi driver who unknowingly helped Yu Jong transport the body.
Oh gosh, that poor guy.
He was completely traumatized by the experience.
Yeah, can't even imagine.
He even refused the reward for reporting the crime.
Wow, really?
And he ended up quitting his job. He just couldn't escape the memory of what he had been a part of.
It just shows how deeply trauma can affect someone, even if they weren't directly involved in the crime.
He became another victim in a way, grappling with the guilt and the horror of it all.
His story is a reminder that the ripple effects of a crime like this can be far-reaching and long-lasting.
It impacts not just the immediate victims and the perpetrator, but also the wider community.
Leaving scars that might never fully heal.
Yeah, it's just so sad to think about everyone affected by this. You know, Hannah's family and friends dealing with this horrific loss, And then the taxi driver, he'll probably never be the same.
Right. And Rotten Mango brought up Yu Jong's grandfather, too, the one who raised her.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, what about him?
He had absolutely no idea about this dark side of her. I mean, he was totally devastated.
It's like a double betrayal, finding out someone you love
Yeah.
is capable of something so awful, and then wondering if you could have done something to prevent it.
Exactly. It's a lot for anyone to process.
This case also sparked a big conversation in South Korea, especially about the safety of these tutoring apps.
Yeah, the one Yu Jong and Hannah used got a lot of criticism for their lack of security.
They basically admitted they had no way to verify the identities of parents who signed up.
That's pretty scary, especially when you think about the potential for abuse.
It's definitely a wake-up call for these online platforms that connect strangers. Like, they need to prioritize safety and make sure they're doing everything they can to protect vulnerable people.
Absolutely, especially in situations like tutoring where there's a power imbalance.
And it all comes back to Yu Jong's motives. Was it really the true crime obsession that pushed her over the edge, or was that just a convenient excuse?
Right, especially if she is a pathological liar like some experts believe.
Then that confession about wanting to experience murder could have just been another lie.
Maybe a way to shock people or control the narrative, who knows?
So we might never really know what was going on in her head, what truly drove her to do this.
It's possible we might be left with this unsettling mystery forever.
Tung Yu Jong. Was she a psychopath? A troubled soul lost in fantasy? Or something else entirely?
That's the question, isn't it? And it's one that doesn't have an easy answer.
This deep dive has been a heavy one, taking us into some really dark corners of the human psyche.
We've seen how isolation and the internet can warp our perceptions and sometimes even fuel violence.
And how the impact of a crime like this can reach far beyond the immediate victims.
It's a reminder that there's still so much we don't understand about the human mind.
And that even the most ordinary seeming people can be capable of great evil.
I think the most important takeaway here is that the darkness that consumed Tong Yujong exists in all of us to some degree.
That's a chilling thought.
It is, but it's a reminder to confront those shadows within ourselves, to choose connection and empathy.
And to work towards a world where these kinds of tragedies become less and less frequent. Well, that's about all the time we have for this deep dive, but I have a feeling this case will stick with us for a while.
Me too. It's definitely one that raises more questions than it answers.
Thanks for joining us on this journey, and as always, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.